High fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, home run. Dodge Mattingly. Tucker makes one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Tablesetters covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined with my tag team partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 103. Happy to be here. And Steve, right off the bat, I got to ask you, how's the gout flare-up?
I'm on the other side of it. I finally succumbed to the pleasures that is medication for it. I just toughed it out my first time a couple months ago. Had to see a doctor and get some medication for it. So I've been on that for about 2 days, and the difference is there. My goal is eventually to get to a point where I'm taking some of the maintenance meds. It runs in the family. My brother has it. My dad has it. It's something that's unavoidable. It's not just diet related anymore, but I was laid up. Foot was the size of a balloon, unable to walk on Sunday watching football. And it just wouldn't go down. So I'm finally able to get around here, got into the podcast room, ready to record, but it's been brutal. So anyone out there that has, as they affectionately call it, the King's disease, it's anything but.
Well, let me ask you this for maybe our younger listeners here that are eating and drinking whatever they want without any consequences. Can you give them a little bit of a picture? Like, what exactly is this, and what is it like? How does it come on? What does it feel like? And how does it affect you, like, for days at a time?
Well, so for people that are unfamiliar with it, it's probably the worst pain that you can ever feel. There's been comparisons, and women are the minority as far as who gets it, but they've compared it to childbirth, and they said it as 10 times more painful than that. It's probably more painful than breaking bones. And it comes on pretty suddenly. So usually in your mid 30s, people that have, drink, eat whatever they want, and it is related to diet. They can pinpoint it to red meat, beer, things like that, eaten unhealthy as you will, because it increases uric acid in your blood. So uric acid does turn to crystals in your joints, which eventually gets to the point where it feels like they're pushing through your skin, and it blows up your foot, and it manifests typically in your foot. And that's where it did for me in my big toe. But for some people, it can be in your ankle, your knee, your elbow, your shoulder, wherever whatever your joints are increasing, sometimes all at the same time. I had the luxury of having the foot and my ankle for the first time. So I was unable to walk for about 2 days. Like I said, I had a doctor's appointment, got some medication. Typically, you need to take the medication before it starts to flare up to get ahead of it. But unfortunately, I was already a couple days in because I was stubborn. But it's not like I can pinpoint. I've cleaned up my diet since the last time. I think it is just one of those genetic things you can't avoid. So enjoy youth while it's there. We have Devin tearing his Achilles. I got my second gout flare in the last 6 months. It's brutal.
Yeah, seriously, the two of us at one point probably limping around. There you have it, folks. Like, if you didn't know what gout was, if you're a little younger, just be careful if you feel this coming on. I will say I've had lots of like heartburn over the years, like diet related, and I've tried to cut certain things out that lead to that. I don't want to jinx it, but luckily gout so far has not been a thing. I don't have the best diet in the world, but certainly not the worst either. But man, getting old is no fun. That's for sure. You got to be careful.
Yeah, I do watch what I eat, and I'm trying my best to, make sure the consumption of water. And again, triggers are for different people. Some people, and like really the generic advice you'd get from a doctor is no seafood, no red meat, no beer. But it could be as easy as being dehydrated or having too much sodium in your diet. Stress equals it as well. So there's really no avoiding it. It is genetic. So, and there's some shame that comes with it. Like, I think a lot of people don't know about it, and they don't know the pain. If you've never been through it, it seems silly. You have a bruise on your toe. It's like, oh, just get up and man up and just walk around. But I'm telling you, I don't wish it upon my worst enemy to have something like this. It is the worst pain I ever felt in my life.
You know, one thing I've been dealing with recently every once in a while that I never used to have, that I'm assuming is age-related, not diet, but just age-related. Every once in a while, I get a stinger. Have you ever gotten a stinger just randomly, like in your shoulder blade or somewhere? It's been happening in the same spot recently, which is making me think there might be some kind of nerve thing, maybe the way I sleep or something like that. But that used to happen zero, and then like I'd have it once a year maybe, and suddenly it's like every other day I'm getting a stinger out of nowhere, and it comes and goes, and it's not like a super debilitating thing. but I guess I'd compare it to a cramp in a way, but a little different sensation.
Yeah, so I'm day to day with the lower body injury. So if I had to play a baseball game today, I would be on the bench, not available for pinch hitting at all, unless you had banana ball rules and someone can run for me. But either way, if you guys want to support our show, we're going to be talking all things baseball at Tablesetters Pod on IG and on the X Machine. Devin guiding the conversation on Twitter, keeping engaging. We've been dropping episodes, trying to do weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, and also adding some of the guest shows in there. We're looking to get more guests on here, maybe some repeat guests as we approach October and really the end of the season, because we're only 20 days left in the regular season at this point, and we are really funneling towards the end. And there's a lot of teams with the expanded playoffs that are still in it, which is magical, keeping a lot of the feeling alive in baseball. And we're going to talk about it when we get to the Rockies and talk about their fan base. And some teams that are out of it are still passionate about their teams over there, even with football season starting, college football getting going. It's awesome to see baseball still alive and thriving with this nice weather out there. People are enjoying the game out there.
Yeah, no doubt. Like you said, the fact that there's such little time left, but so much still to be decided. I mean, I did a post earlier this morning, kind of ranking the potential 1-2-3 combos. We're going to talk about this too, of pitching staffs that might be in the playoffs. Might be. So, like, I kept on going to teams that are still like in reasonable contention. I probably even left a couple teams out that are still like not that far off. And 18 teams. I have 18 rankings. When I first thought of the idea as a post, I'm like, yeah, you get like 14 teams up there or something like that. And as I'm going, I'm like, if I include them, they're only a half game behind them. I got to include them as well. So yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of those races that are going on right now. But it's going to be. I have a feeling it's going to be a crazy end of the season.
Yeah, and as we approach the end, I remember being, we mentioned being younger back in the day where the baseball season felt like it expanded forever. And as the years go on, I know that we've talked about the pitch clock and really speeding up the game in the immediate, but I don't know if it's just time flying by for us on the day-to-day basis. We're all busy, have different responsibilities, but it feels like the season is shorter than ever. And all these people that are around, even trying to cut a few games and going lower than 162, it seems like, why would you ever do that when you have such a crunch at the end of the season that's creating so much tension and pressure with all these teams playing for something? I think 162, the further we get into it, it's the right amount of games. And much like the American Constitution drawn up, Declaration of Independence, like they had foresight when 162 was created and birthed when it was made.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, we saw it last year. Some of these races are coming down to game 162. We've seen a game 163 in the past. I know that I have to remind myself every year now that that's not a thing anymore as far as tiebreakers go. And I was reminded of that fact today, actually, when I saw a post about the Giants being only 2 games back of the Mets, and it said, but realistically, it's actually 2.5 because the Mets hold the tiebreaker on the Giants. And that clicked. I'm like, oh yeah. If they were tied at the end of the regular season, they would not play a 1-game playoff. It would just be who has the tiebreaker, which, again, we talked about this last year a little bit, so we won't rehash the entire conversation. To me, that's like a little anticlimactic. Obviously, as a Met fan, I'd be happy to be in that situation, having the tiebreaker, but if you're the other team, it kind of stinks.
Yeah, 163 was that magical moment for the younger fans out there. I mean, at this point, there might have been people that are listening here that are teenagers or young adults that were tiny children when it happened. It's been that long since we've had it. So Magic, Longoria, everything that went on there. So we'll get into all that stuff, but let's head into our opening say and start our conversation here with Anthony Rizzo. All right, I'm putting my cards on the table for my opening say, talking about Anthony Rizzo. And we saw him in the Bronx last night, chugging a Bud Light on camera. And Anthony Rizzo, really the cornerstone of the Cubs' modern renaissance and a beloved figure in the Windy City. He announced a retirement from Major League Baseball, and the team will celebrate him on Saturday at Wrigley during their 120 game against the Rays. He will be officially introduced as a Cubs ambassador. So we can talk about Rizzo's history, being acquired from San Diego back in 2012. He really became the face of the Theo Epstein rebuild. And you can look at other players here, but Rizzo was the guy who was there from the beginning of when the Cubs really emerged into that window, eventually winning the World Series in 2016. And by 2014, his offensive game had blossomed, pairing power with really crowding the plate and putting pitches in play. And I think people forget how good Anthony Rizzo was. I think obviously he kind of sputtered out with the concussion injuries last year in New York, but I think his peak to me coincided with the Cubs' rise to the top of baseball. three-time All-Star, multi-time Gold Glove winner. And this is a guy defining moment. He's the guy catching Chris Bryant's throw to record the final out of the World Series. He puts the ball in the back of his pocket, a leader that goes beyond the field. It's the right thing to do for the Cubs. Awesome to see. And I love that baseball is able to do this, and he's able to retire a Chicago Cub.
Yeah, I love that he'll be involved with the organization going forward. I think that's the correct way to go. It's a little bit of a shame that like one of the last things we'll remember about Rizzo is that play with Garrett Cole where they don't end up getting the out at first base, and what was one of many kind of lowlights for the Yankees in that game in the World Series. But you know what? There's this weird thing in sports where sometimes something like that happens where a guy's career ends in like a not great way. And by the way, we didn't know Rizzo's career was done, and we can talk about that part in a minute. At the end of last year, and you think, oh man, that's gonna be the lasting memory of that guy. Time kind of brings you back to what you really should remember, and I give the comparison sometimes of Brett Favre. Like I think we thought like, oh man, we're gonna remember Brett Favre and that bad year in the Jets, and then that terrible interception in the NFC Championship on the Vikings. Now years go by, and I know we could talk about a lot of other stuff with Brett Favre. That's not what I'm getting at. I mean the playing stuff, like. You remember him as a Packer in the snow and all those crazy plays he's made. So I think similar with Rizzo, like what you just said, the putting the ball in his back pocket, that's the first image I have in my head already. And only a year has gone by since that Yankees, outcome in the World Series that they did not want. And the other thing that I alluded to that I'm interested in hearing your take. Don't you feel like Rizzo had a little bit left in the tank? Like I know he wasn't going to be nearly the player he was, but I heard him earlier in the season before retirement kind of like saying he was very surprised and almost felt a little disrespected at some of the low numbers that were being given to him. I don't think he was looking for any kind of mega deal, but wanted the deal to at least be respectful if you're going to go play Major League Baseball for 162 games and leave your family at that age. Do you feel like he probably had another year or two or maybe even more?
Yeah, I think he did. And if you listen to players like Eric Hosmer talk about this, by the tail end of your career, you just know when it's up. And I know he probably could play similar to David Ortiz, where Ortiz had that magical last season and people probably could have squeezed a couple $1 million contracts out of it. But for Rizzo, and I know you mentioned the Yankee World Series thing and ending his career on that note probably wasn't as fulfilling. But as you mentioned, time does heal all. And looking at some of the numbers for him, 303 home runs, 242 of them were as a Cub, a career slash line of 261, 361, and 467. And he joins the list of the ambassadors for the Cubs. They don't just give it to anybody. It's not like, oh, we love you guys in Chicago. Here's this honor. It's only been awarded to Andre Dawson, Fergie Jenkins, Billy Williams, Kerry Wood, and Ben Zobrist. So these guys are a who's who of Chicago baseball and heroes in the city. And the other thing I think about Chicago, and we can get into a long-winded conversation somewhere down the line about this, is how quickly they tore apart that core team. 2016, they win the World Series. It feels like they're on the cusp of winning a few. And 2021, they get rid of Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, and of course, Anthony Rizzo goes to the wayside. And that core is gone. And they're able to build upon what they had there. And, we look at that as a turning point of what could have been. At least, we're happy to get breaking the curse, the Billy Goat curse and everything that went on. But to see them not get multiple World Series where it felt like the window was wide open for it really makes you appreciate when you win. You have to really savor it because it doesn't happen often. And sometimes it only happens once.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard recently a lot of talk on social media of Cubs fans, like just looking back and being like, I wish we had the foresight to sign Schwarber to a lifetime contract, because you see what Kyle Schwarber's doing now. And, that's another, we'll talk about Kyle Schwarber more not far from now, to be honest, in this episode. And I'm sure down the road, we're going to talk about his upcoming free agency at some point too. But yeah, it is strange to think that team that is such a historical team because of what they did, the magnitude of that win. It just wasn't just any World Series. It came with all that history before it. To think they were gone in a flash. I mean, Rizzo retiring now, Chris Bryant, I hate to say it, and I'm not trying to have like a mean tone towards it, but might as well be retired. It kind of feels that way. And what he's actually been able to do on the field or at all on the field the last couple of years with Colorado. And, it's nice to see Baez have a little rebirth and be on a playoff team. And obviously Kyle Schwarber is carrying the flag for that old 2016 Cubs team, because his career doesn't look like there's an end anywhere in sight at the moment.
And the other thing too, we have to mention Rizzo is the fight off the field for him. He has the Anthony Rizzo Family Foundation raise millions of dollars in the fight against childhood cancer. And he had overcome Hodgkin's lymphoma back in 2008. So that was the essential when he was a prospect in Boston. This was something that he was dealt in a hand of cards, that he came out there and really took that and built on character for himself and was an inspiration for everybody. I mean, he remained a fixture at the Leary Children's Hospital. He stepped up in many different ways in that city, and, you know, just off the field, just a leader all through and through. And when you look at that Cubs team in 2016, and we start to kind of have the foresight, force for the trees type of stuff, did you always know that Rizzo was the face of that World Series team? Because Tom Ricketts came out and just said it flat out. He was the face of one of the most successful eras in Chicago Cubs history. Did you always believe Rizzo was the guy, or was it to you at one point? Was it Chris Bryant, or was it Javi Baez? Like, who represented that team to you?
Yeah, that's a tough question to go back and kind of get back to my thoughts. I certainly think of him as the face now, but you're asking me back then. I did feel like that team was a little bit of an example of a team that didn't just have one figurehead, that was kind of a group of four or so like that. I mean, it's easy to forget how popular Javi Baez was back then, like, because he was hitting and his fielding was so insanely slick, and the tags and everything he did was just magical to watch. And Chris Bryant, it's easy to forget how popular he was there too. I mean, that guy was seen as, I think people thought he was going to be a lifetime Cub and just a star for a long time. It's very difficult to foresee some of the injuries he's gone through that have obviously completely changed the trajectory of his career. But I would, if I'm being honest, I have to say, no, I don't think I was sitting there like, yeah, Anthony Rizzo is the face. I think you could probably back then debate it. It'd be a pretty good debate back then. All right, which of these guys is the face? And you can't say Schwarber. That would be revisionist history. I know he had some big moments returning from the injury to the playoffs, but I think he was thought of as kind of a side guy, like really good player when he was healthy. But I would say those other three that we just named, Rizzo, Bryant, and Javi, had a better chance at being the face back then at that time.
Yeah, and with the scope of PTI, and we'll have a segment that's kind of in lieu of what they do. They were talking about Schwarber and what he's done so far this year. We will discuss the 50 home run mark and all of that. Who would have thought that Schwarber turned out to be as multidimensional as he's become as a hitter, where everyone was talking about him as just this weapon that where does he fit on a baseball field? And who would have thought that Schwarber was the guy that everybody should have been targeting, like you mentioned, the Cubs, but he's had different spots in different spaces. The Yankees were trying to trade for him for years. And then for Boston just to outright think that he's not a fit, it's wild to think where Schwarber wound up.
Yeah, he kind of jumped around there for a little bit before ending up in Philly with a longer term deal. And like I said, I think his free agency is going to be super interesting after the season.
So you do have some saddening news to talk about here for your opening say.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of just, and a lot of people have done this because it's been days since this happened, but I wanted to give some love to Davey Johnson, now late Davey Johnson. Sad, but also like the more I watch and read and talk about Davey Johnson's life, like damn good life this guy had. It's always sad to see someone go, but obviously as a Met fan, I think of him as that 1986 team, the World Series winning team with the Mets. He lived an amazing life. This is one thing I saw in a New York Times article that caught my eye. You think of these managers that sit there for 162 games a year, and you kind of wonder, like, when they're done with baseball or when the season's not going on, like, what are they doing? Because I feel like they're like, most of these guys are lifers that are just so used to traveling from field to field, and just that's what they do every single day for so long. And most of them played baseball before they manage. So it turns out he had plenty of other interests and achievements off the field. Scratch golfer, a wealthy real estate investor, a licensed pilot, an accomplished fisherman, and a scuba diving instructor. I mean, that's pretty cool. He also graduated from Trinity University with a degree in mathematics, which that actually has something to do with his baseball career too, which I'll get into in a minute. I'm going to list a few other really cool things that maybe not everybody knows about Davey Johnson. Played in 4 World Series as a player in 6 seasons as the Orioles' second baseman. Obviously mentioned the win as manager of the Mets in '86. Here's the math part that I found fascinating. Many call him the kind of the first manager to use something similar to analytics when it came to team building, lineup construction, and strategy. There was a story in there that said apparently in his kind of side quest for a degree in mathematics, he did a project. This was when he was a player, actually, first, where he used mathematics to make an optimal Orioles lineup. and he actually presented it to Earl Weaver at the time. And he said Earl Weaver just took it and literally tossed it in the trash. But that just goes to show you, like, analytics is not necessarily a new thing. Like, he was using numbers to show how the Orioles could change their lineup to create more runs, like, on a nightly basis, which is pretty cool. Every single team he managed improved their record from his first year to his second year as manager. So just proven like he knew how to get it done. I've seen lots of interviews with 1986 Mets players, Ron Darling, Darryl Strawberry, Keith Hernandez, and on and on and on. They kind of all have similar answers where they're like, listen, he let us be who we wanted to be. Like, he was definitely a player's manager, but he also, like, if you pissed him off, he would get your attention real quick. Like, he would not mince words. He seemed to be, like, when you listen to these guys, and those are some big personalities on the 1986 Mets, he seemed to be one of the few guys that understood how to kind of thread that needle of being like, I'm the boss, but I'm also going to let you guys kind of do your thing unless I need to step in. I don't think there's a lot of guys still to this current day that can kind of find that groove there. So cool to listen to them. And I mean, Ron Darling basically credited him completely with his career and what it turned out to be. He said, if I didn't play for Davey Johnson, I wouldn't have been the same guy. A couple other things. He is the answer to lots of crazy trivia questions. I'm going to run through a few. If someone asked you who got the last hit off of Sandy Koufax in Koufax's career, it's Davey Johnson. If someone asked you who made the last out of the 1969 World Series, Davey Johnson. Funny enough, that was the Mets winning against him. Weird how things kind of connect and come full circle. Who was the first player to hit 2 pinch hit grand slams in the same season? It's Davey Johnson. I'm giving you guys gold here if you're going to do some baseball trivia. And this one's really cool. Who was in the lineup the first 2 times Babe Ruth's home run record was surpassed? So he was in the Braves lineup when Hank Aaron hit his 715th home run. He was also in the I'm probably saying this wrong, Yomiuri Giants lineup in Japan when Sadaharu Oh hit his 715th home run. And both times he wasn't on deck. He was the next guy. He was in the hole. Just weird stuff. He also hit 43 home runs one year, which I did not realize. Like, that's a heck of a lot of home runs at the second base position. This is cool, too. Kind of, again, coming full circle. Began his managerial career managing Mets youngsters like Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden. Finished it in Washington managing Nationals youngsters Bryce Harper and Steven Strasburg. So, I mean, what a life this guy lived, and obviously affected tons of players and obviously his family and friends as well. But I've heard lots of people say, like, a little rough around the edges, but like, he just knows how to get things done. He knows what he wants, and he kind of goes right for it. So the baseball world will definitely miss a guy like Davey Johnson.
Yeah, well said. And he seems like the guy that you'd want to sit across the bar from and share a drink. And he probably judge you on what you order. So make sure you order appropriately. But all the things you talked about, how can you not be romantic about baseball when it all comes circular in that way? And the one thing I will add to what you were saying is, you mentioned 1986, but if there is a what if with Davey Johnson's career, with the expanded playoffs, the wild card that we see today, the Mets could almost certainly been a fixture in October, year after year, perhaps rewriting some history and then becoming a true dynasty instead of a one-time champion. I think obviously the 86 Mets, it is something, second title in Mets history, probably their best title. 69 was certainly great because it was so early into their tenure of being a team. But 86 is really what the Mets franchise is built upon. You mentioned Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, Keith Hernandez, and managing all those personalities. It is a real life drama that happened on the field, and he was able to thread that needle, which I think is the appropriate verb to use, of being able to ride that roller coaster of everything that went down. Because in a world where he's not able to do that and being the leader on the field, that could crash and burn. And you can talk about, dark side of baseball where it didn't go right. You can sensationalize and romanticize the things that happened because they won. And Davey Johnson had a huge part in that. And he nearly achieved, all the things on the field, like you mentioned, in every facet of the game. He managed so much chaos, but he also found a way. And you think about if a playoff system like today existed, he would have multiple titles. I think he's going to be remembered for being a pioneer for the stuff with the analytics that he's done before his time, but as a champion. And he turned one of baseball's more colorful teams into one of the more memorable teams that easily could have crashed and burned. So rest in peace, Davey Johnson, and all the best to him. But what a life, 82 years strong.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's interesting because you just got done talking about how It's crazy that the 2016 Cubs didn't end up doing more together and just kind of seemed to be disbanded relatively quickly after that historic win. The Mets, I mean, I still hear the former 86 Mets talk about all the time. They don't understand. Well, they do, but they just felt like once they won in 86, they were going to win at least another one, if not another two or more. And all of a sudden you blink an eye, and for a lot of different reasons, it's just not the same club anymore. A couple heartbreaking losses too. But Davey Johnson, also the guy that moved Cal Ripken Jr. from shortstop to third base as Baltimore manager.
Yeah, and I know the Mets in 86 had 108 wins and all of that, but there's some conversation in Mets lore, and we were not alive to appreciate it, but the 1988 NLCS loss to the Cardinals, who were the underdog at the time, a lot of people believe that season Mets team was the better team. And look at that, what could have been for the Mets having 2 or 3 years having titles. 88 was a magical season as well, but obviously ends in defeat. No one really remembers it.
Yeah, and again, that's just something that I don't know. I hear people talk about all the time where someone gets to the World Series or someone gets to the Super Bowl or on and on at a young age. And all of a sudden you interview them at the end of their career or 5 years after, and that's what they'll bring up all the time. Like, once I got to that one, I just figured it was going to be a pretty regular occurrence. And you don't realize how difficult that journey to get back is. And you hear people talk about this sometimes when a team, and we're seeing it, maybe you could debate it with the Dodgers right now, where you think a powerhouse team is just going to get there year after year, but the toll that takes to try to get back there every year, that's quite a hurdle. And like, you're playing more games than everybody else when you get to the World Series. So there is that legitimate part of just wear and tear and kind of mental grind that is, I think, more difficult than a lot of people realize.
Just want to correct myself. The Mets lost to the Dodgers in 1988. So again, I wasn't alive for
Mike
it. But
Mike
yeah,
Scioscia, who barely hit any home runs ever,
yeah,
hits the home run that kind of is devastating. Yeah,
7 games, but
tough.
they were a 100 win team that year, first place in the division, all that stuff. And what they did was just as remarkable. It just didn't end in glory with a parade. Like that's, and I think a good conversation in an off season and a quiet winter morning or evening when we want to talk baseball, it would be really enlightening to talk about some of the teams that get buried in history because they didn't win a title. And everyone wants to talk about those Mariners teams that broke records, but there's other teams that had great seasons that just no one talks about them because it didn't ultimately end with them standing tall, the last team that won. And then I think that's just fascinating. Same thing happens in football.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that would be a great conversation to have. We'll have to write that one down. Maybe a blind rankings kind of thing or something like that.
All right, well, let's head into the meat of the order and talk about the rest of the news around baseball.
We have the meat.
All right. Thank you to Arby's for leading us in. We are not sponsored, but we would love to be sponsored by Arby's. Heading into the meat of the order, we're going to open with the aforementioned Kyle Schwarber reaching the 50 home run mark, but also his NL East counterpart, Juan Soto, hitting a milestone for himself, reaches the 30-30 club. And Shohei Ohtani is the favorite right now for MVP. So let's not get lost in this. And we want to make conversation of this because we want to appreciate, just as World Series champions are not the only teams we want to remember during seasons, it's possible to have teams and players that have MVP performances that just fall short. And we potentially are looking at it this year with Kyle Schwarber reaching a milestone mark, which is only the second Philly ever after Ryan Howard to do this, 34th individual to hit 50 home runs in a season. And Juan Soto doing things a little bit differently than how we're used to seeing him do things in baseball.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Interesting note about Schwarber and Cal Raleigh along with him. They will end up being the 2 lowest batting averages we've ever seen connected to 50 or more home runs. Apparently, before these two, the lowest batting average anybody ever had while hitting 50 or more home runs was 260. These guys are going to be around 240, and I haven't seen the updated numbers tonight, but they will definitely be the lowest. So an interesting note, because you think of power hitters nowadays as guys that do hit for a little bit of lower average a lot of the times. Not always. You got Aaron Judge out there. You got Shohei that usually hits around 300 as well, but a lot of the other guys kind of their average is 250 or below sometimes when they're a power hitter. But not to be true historically when you look at the numbers. But anyway, to get to these numbers, 30-30 for Soto, which is quite an achievement for him. He's had a hell of a year. He also joined Jeff Bagwell and Barry Bonds as the only players ever to have a season with at least 35 home runs, at least 30 stolen bases, and at least 115 walks in a season. That's a short list, and I don't think it's going to get much longer anytime soon. He might do it again if he wants to keep up the stolen bases thing. I don't know if he will. Sometimes people have one season of that and then kind of go back to their old ways. But if we're talking, listen, which one of these numbers gets their guy to a higher mark on the MVP list, I'm going to give it to Schwarber here. And again, I'm not saying Schwarber is going to beat out Ohtani. We're basically saying who gets second place as of now, unless one of these guys goes on a crazy tear. For me, it's Schwarber, and it almost comes down to the age-old argument of what should an MVP be? Should they have to be on a winning team? And, Alex Rodriguez years ago won MVP on the Texas Rangers. They were a terrible team. We've had lots of examples of that. To me, if you are MVP, I feel like you have to be leading your team to something. Kyle Schwarber is very much leading his team to the National League East title. They beat down on the Mets once again tonight, and he's had so many clutch moments. My favorite stat out of all the stats, and I've said this before in the show, is WRC plus. I just like to use that as seeing the whole player and the whole circumstance. Soto 157 for the season before tonight. Schwarber 151. So Soto has him in that. Here's the thing. Schwarber leads all of Major League Baseball before tonight with 123 RBIs. I mean, that's a hell of a number. He might end up at 140, which we don't see very often anymore. Soto's at 94, which, nothing to sneeze at by any means. He's going to get to 100 most likely as well. But to me, while you see the Phillies pulling away from the Mets and beating their brains in this series, I think Kyle Schwarber has a leg up on Soto, even if a little bit as a whole, Soto's numbers may be a little more impressive if you look at the entire thing, the entire scope. But I'm going to give it to Schwarber as far as those two against each other right now.
Yeah, and I think what we also talk about is the eye test. And you think about the iconic moments this year. We had the 4-home run game back on August 28th, the All-Star game, swing-off MVP, just leading Philly and being the emotional leader in that clubhouse. And he is chasing not only a first-place division title for the Phillies, but he may break the record that Ryan Howard, I mentioned him being only the second ever Philly to ever hit 50 home runs, and Ryan Howard had hit 58 that one year. It feels like he has plenty of time to get to that point. In 3 weeks, I think we could see him run off for 8 home runs. But I do agree. I think Schwarber, to me, passes the eye test in that regard. But I think we should put some appreciation on what the season became for Juan Soto. And no one should feel bad for him, but the heaviness that laid upon getting that contract, all the drama in the offseason, being booed in the Bronx, he turned it around and, again, added another dimension to his game. And what is a generational player. We have to appreciate that. He is in the 30-30 club. We talked about it. He's only the 5th ever Met to ever reach that mark, which is already, you want to appreciate it. And he's only 2 home runs away from hitting a rare territory, which is the 40-30 club. 15 players have hit that all time. And just a little key stat, a little nugget for people. Maybe they're not happy about this, but he has stolen more bases than home runs since the All-Star break. Kind of shows just the selflessness of his game, changing the approach for him. He's aggressive on the base paths. This is things we have not seen. He does have the speed to be able to steal bases, but it's about being able to be very selective about being in a spot to get yourself into scoring position. And it is kind of a philosophical approach that, do you want Juan Soto to prioritize this? To me, I think it's a good thing to add this layer to your game, because we know at any point he's dangerous to hit in a clutch situation. He has ice in his veins, but he also shows that he's willing to be in a spot to let someone else take the baton. And there's plenty of guys in that lineup offensively that are willing and could do it as well. And I appreciate this from Juan Soto, because everyone was so quick to dump on him, and Yankee fans, and I am one of them myself, of saying like, oh, you took the contract and you have been buried under the expectations of the Mets. I think he's been all that and more from the Mets this year. I think it's not his fault the Mets are where they are. He's been offensively everything you could have asked for and more. The pitching staff has failed. The bullpen has failed, but it's not Juan Soto's fault. When the ink has dried in the back of the baseball card for Juan Soto this year, everyone should look at this season as very impressive, especially with the weight of what this offseason brought in front of him. So Juan Soto, shout out to him. But looking at Schwarber and Soto next to each other, I think neither one of them won the NL MVP. But if I had to make a second place with a bullet, it'd be Schwarber. But Soto's season needs to be appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, Soto, it's crazy that the Mets are going to end up having a poorer record than last year, most likely here. But not, like you said, not Soto's fault. I mean, if you want to talk about value, where would the Mets be without Juan Soto? Because he's been fantastic for a while now, and they've still struggled. Without him, I don't. They might be 5 games out of the playoff picture right now if he wasn't there. But again, it just seems like Schwarber's performance has meant a little bit more at this point. But I still think there's more work to be done for either of them to get past Ohtani. I do think it's possible. I really do. I don't think Ohtani has it locked up yet.
Yeah, it will be a conversation. We have 3 weeks here, and the Dodgers have come back to earth again as they do. They ebb and flow for sure, but Ohtani would have, right now he's standing above head and shoulders of the MVP race. But like you said, stranger things have happened, and maybe if something happens on the in between, we see some historic performances. But Ohtani has a leg up in this regard right now. But let's head into the conversation. You alluded to before, the Twitter thread that you posted with the 1-2-3 pitching punch that I'm calling MLB Jam, having our 3 pitchers that you're opening a playoff series with. And with the grace of all the expanded playoffs, we have, as you mentioned, 19 teams to discuss here of potentially a trio that is the most dangerous. And you posted the rankings. I, obviously go through them. I have my rebuttals to them, but I thought it was a really solid list that you made.
Yeah, so I'll try to quickly go here. And if you're listening, you can kind of pull up Twitter right now and just have this as a kind of companion to this conversation. It's pinned right at the top of our profile, so not difficult to find if you follow us on X. All right, so I'm going to read it quickly, just quick through it so everyone knows if they're not looking at that list. And then I want to hear anything you would change or disagree with, or maybe just question why I put someone where I put them. So starting off number 1, I don't know if I would have put them there a month ago. I have the Dodgers at the top. Blake Snell, Yamamoto, Glasnow. I don't know if that's the order they go. That's the order I would go personally, which is how I tried to look at this based on a lot of different factors, to be honest. But I think the Dodgers, they fell out of that spot, and we're just talking about the pitching, the 1, 2, 3 right now. That's it. We're not talking about the bullpen. We're not talking about the offense, but I have them at the top of this 1, 2, 3 pitching punches list. By the way, pitching punches among potential playoff teams. That's a lot of P's right there. What's that called? Onomatopoeia? Or is that something else?
Nice, Devin.
No. Is it? No, I think I got it wrong. Hold on. No, alliteration. I think it's alliteration.
Yeah, onomatopoeia is the words that you use for like comic book noises, like pow and bam, that type of stuff.
Alliteration is the same sound, the same letter sound, I think. So yeah. Anyway, all right. So the Dodgers, number 1. Number 2, I have the Seattle Mariners, Logan Gilbert, Brian Wu, George Kirby as the 1, 2, 3. Obviously, Luis Castillo is going to be somewhere in that mix as well. Philadelphia Phillies, Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez, Jesus Luzardo. If Wheeler's healthy, they're probably at the top of the list, but he's not. He's not there for this. So still very high up on the list. And obviously Aaron Nola looked good against the Mets the other night. If he has another couple starts like that, maybe he's above Jesus Luzardo. But we'll wait and see on that. Boston Red Sox coming in at number 4, Garrett Crochet, Brian Bayo, and Lucas Giolito. San Diego Padres at number 5, Nick Pivetta, the returning Michael King, and Dylan Cease, who I know has been disappointing. The Milwaukee Brewers at number 6, Freddie Peralta, who's been unreal. Brandon Woodruff, Jacob Mizorowski. Number 7, Cincinnati Reds, Hunter Green, Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo. Remember, this is potential playoff teams, so they're in the mix. I know they're not in the picture right now, but they're in the mix, so they get to be on this list. If they get in, pretty nice rotation, to be honest. Number 8, Detroit Tigers. Tarek Skubal's got to count for something, right? Jack Flaherty, who looked better tonight against the Yankees. He's had a bad run, but looked good tonight. Casey Mize in the 3 spot. New York Yankees at number 9, Max Fried, Carlos Rodon, and I think it would be Cam Schlittler, to be honest. I know that's not how they drew it up a while ago, but I think he's the number 3 right now, if it's me. Number 10, Texas Rangers, Jacob deGrom, Merrill Kelly, Jack Leiter. Number 11, San Francisco Giants, Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Justin Verlander. Number 12, Chicago Cubs, Shota Imanaga, Matthew Boyd, Cade Horton. Houston Astros at number 13, which would be a shock if I said it 2 weeks ago, and maybe people will still disagree, but Framber Valdez, Hunter Brown, Christian Javier. Number 14, maybe it's Jason Alexander with how good he's been at times, but that's playoff experience right there with Javier. Number 14, Toronto Blue Jays, Shane Bieber, Jose Barrios, Kevin Gossman. They've got a couple other options, but that would be my 1, 2, 3. Tampa Bay Rays at 15, Ryan Pepio, Drew Rasmussen, and Shane Baz. Number 16, my New York Mets. I think you got to put Nolan McLean in the ace spot. David Peterson, Clay Holmes. I'm sure there are people shouting, Mets fans right now, Clay Holmes? Why not Jonah Tong? Why not Brandon Sproat? Listen, I just trying to be realistic here. It's not, I just think it would be Clay Holmes. I don't know if they would put 2 youngsters in that top 3. Number 17, Cleveland Guardians, Gavin Williams, Tanner Bybee, probably Joey Cantillo based on how he's thrown recently. Number 18, Kansas City Royals, Michael Wacha, if he comes back from that concussion. Noah Cameron, Michael Lorenzen. Remember, Seth Lugo's on the IL. We still need a little more information to see if he's going to, I mean, they might not make the playoffs, but even if they do, is he going to be back? So those are my 18 thoughts.
It was a great list. There's only minor adjustments, only for the sake of conversation. I'd be happy if he rolled it out and there's nothing egregious on it. I would put Philly above Seattle, despite losing Wheeler and Nola and all the stuff that we've seen adjustment. What we saw from Ranger Suarez last night and Christopher Sanchez, I think it just elevates them a little bit above. The other spot I had Scooble and the Tigers being a little bit further ahead. I think you had them at 7. Is that where you had them? Or you had them at 8?
Had them at 8. Had them at 8.
Yeah, you had him at 8, and I have him in the top 4 just because Scooble carrying them. I think him being the best pitcher in baseball in 2025. I think going head to head with an ace, he carries and carry the weight. Casey Mize, as we saw in the Bronx, can carry some stability. He has not been as advertised of the de facto number 1 pick in a draft, but he has been pretty reliable. And then Flaherty obviously inconsistently limits their ceiling, but I think this is a top 4 group with Scooble's dominance alone. I also look at this list as well, and I think some more love needs to be put on the Cincinnati Reds. And I don't want to get too hyperbolic on them. And I think you had them at 7. I probably would put them in the 5th or 6th spot. It's hard for me to put them above the Red Sox, but I think I would be comfortable putting them above the Padres just because quietly one of the more effective trios in 2025. And I guess everyone that's out here listening that has followed the Reds, health and innings are definitely going to be a problem here as far as volume because of the only barrier keeping them from probably being in the top 3. We have not seen a lot of these pitchers go to that level. So I think if they get to the playoffs, that would be a question of like, this is uncharted territory for some of these young arms, but I do love the firepower they bring 1 through 3. But other than that, I really enjoyed this list. I thought it was a good conversation. It was eye-opening to think about all the teams that are still involved, obviously, and looking at some of how things change. Because if you would have made this list probably in April or May, this would look completely different. And more eye-opening is really just the fall of the Astros, and just obviously with Hunter Brown being their frontline ace, but the support behind him is so uneven. Obviously they're solid and be happy starting any of those guys, but they're solid in name alone. I mean, Valdez has been, we'll talk about the story with him. That's, shocking. And maybe there's a layer to some of the controversy that goes a little bit deeper, but they have been weaker there. And it's not your mom and dad's Houston Astros from a few years ago. This is a team that is very top heavy with Hunter Brown. And who would have thought?
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me a few weeks ago, like you said, Fromber and Hunter Brown at the top, I would have been like, yeah, they're top 3 rotation that I would fear in the playoffs. Texas Rangers, we should mention. I mean, if Nate Eovaldi's still healthy and you have DeGrom and Eovaldi at the top of the rotation, that's a top 5, if not top 3, maybe even top 2 playoff rotation. And crazy enough is they're getting it done. They're on fire right now. It's not just Eovaldi out. Half their starting lineup is out in Marcus Semien and Adolis Garcia and Corey Seager, and they're tearing it up with these guys that a lot of people have never heard of, youngsters. So they're a whole different situation. By the way, maybe I should save this for coming around third, but Jacob deGrom on the Citi Field mound for the first time since he left. I mean, as bad as the Mets are playing, still must-see TV. But yeah, you're right. This is like a list that could literally change day to day. Let me ask you about your Yankees, though. What did you think of my, not necessarily the ranking at number 9, you can tell me about that too, but what do you think about Fried, Rodon, and then Schlittler being the number 3? Do you agree that he's the next guy after those first 2?
I probably, if I had a decision to make, I probably would go with Will Warren, but I think Schlittler has proved a lot there. I love what I've seen from Will Warren his last couple times out. I'd be more comfortable going out there with a Will Warren, but Schlittler has been more than you could have expected from him coming on the mound. I would have ranked them a little bit higher than you had him, but it's right in the same vicinity. I think Fried and Rodon are going to carry the weight here, but I'd be more comfortable with Will Warren, especially when we've seen him at the tail end of the season. And I guess the same reservations I have about Schlittler is the situation with the Reds. Like you have not seen it. I guess Will Warren, you can make the same case because he's just as a rookie as we've seen with Schlittler. I mean, it's hard for me, easy for me to say, pal.
We're going to get an explicit. We're going to get an explicit rating on this episode.
They were saying the same thing on the Yes Network. I think Paul O'Neill kept saying Schlittler, and I'm like, is he saying Schlittler? But I mean,
I know how he feels.
Yeah, exactly. So it was hard to say here. And it reminds me of the conversation where, and I know I'm going off on a diatribe here, when Jazz Chisholm was acquired and someone had called Michael K, and he mentioned on the show, he's like, be careful saying the name. And Michael K was trying to figure it out on the air. of like, what mistake would I make? Because Miami kept making the call. And you guys can out there and imagine what the mistake would be. But like, never once have I messed up Jazz Chisholm, but Cam Schlittler is a little bit more challenging. And that's why the professionals out there do and get paid the big bucks.
That's right. Yeah, but anyway, if you're listening to this and we went through that list, maybe you're looking at an X now and something is outrageous to you, let us know. I mean, it's a list I went through. I started it last night. I woke up this morning, looked at it again, and actually made a couple changes. In my opinion, like the top 6, maybe even 7 are rotations I really, really like as far as 1 through 3. By the time you get to the Tigers at number 8, even though they have Skubal, I'm a little unsure about the rest of it. Listen, Skubal can't pitch every game, and if he matches up against an ace, he very well may lose that if his offense can't get on the other guy. So, I mean, once it gets to number 8 and then Yankees at 9 and it keeps on going, you start to see, in my opinion, more question marks, but still some very solid. I mean, even at number 11, the Giants, I love Logan Webb at the top. If Robbie Ray is right, I mean, that's a hell of a number 2, and Justin Verlander has shown some life recently during the Giants' hot stretch. So lots to talk about, lots to debate. Cubs are another team that I think I probably would have put a little higher earlier in the season. Imanaga, Boyd, Cade Horton's been great. And maybe that's one that people are saying, and like that needs to be up the list a little bit. There's a lot to debate.
Yeah, Matthew Boyd certainly has been tuckered out since the end of the season. There's a lot of fatigue on that arm. We watched a lot of miles per hour off the fastball. He's tired. Hopefully they can get him right for the playoffs. But the one saving grace of potentially the Mets rotation, if Senga can get right down on the minors, like Luke Skywalker on Hoth just recovering, and that could be there. I think Senga could be a big part of this picture if he returns to form, and maybe it's about a confidence, but that is being the ultimate optimist for him to accept the AAA. And we talked about that, the assignment back down to the minors. Something has to be seriously wrong for him to accept what's going on there. But if you want to be the optimist, glass half full type of situation, Senga coming back and being the reinforcement for the Mets in a depth role, or being a guy that comes out third out of the gate of a playoff series, I mean, you have to be happy with that if Senga can return to 85% of what he was last year.
Yeah, well, you know what? We might as well jump into it because that's the next topic here. We'll transition right into it perfectly. The Mets have now lost 5 in a row. Philly's just having their way with them. The Giants keep on winning. I know they lost today, which thank God as a Met fan. The Reds are still playing the Padres as we speak, so we'll see. It's getting close. Giants 2 back of the Mets, who at one point we thought, even though they weren't playing well, no one else is really taking advantage of it. Now it seems like they're begging somebody behind them to come take it. Like a couple weeks ago, the offense was on fire and the pitching couldn't get right. Offense has come back down to earth a little bit, and the pitching still can't get right. Even with the fun part of getting these kids up here, and 3 of them within a month's time, McClain, Sproat, Jonah Tong, how often do you see that your top 3 pitching prospects are up here within a month's time? I know it's exciting, probably not a good sign. Like, to be honest, let's be honest. There's probably a reason that doesn't usually happen. And the fact that we kind of have to rely on them being able to shoulder a big load now is not great. Another thing that kind of pissed me off a little bit this morning, people piling on Sean Manaea and saying like it's ridiculous that we have to watch this guy every 5th or 6th day. Like, how long are they going to do this? A lot of Mets fans out there are mad because Mendoza already announced he is going to make his next start. Here's what I'll say. Kodai Senga is down trying to get right in the minor leagues, like Steve just said. We've already called the 3 kids up. Who do you want to take Manaea's spot? Like, people don't think about this stuff before they just blast a tweet out there. And some of these people are actually reputable people, by the way. I'm not going to shout them out in a negative way on the podcast, but some of them are parts of very big baseball brands. And it's just like, I know the answer would be like, listen, even without Manaea, you could still have 5, right? You could have Peterson, the 3 kids, and Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes might be fighting for his life here. Couldn't get through 5 again tonight. He's pitched more innings than he's ever pitched, right? David Peterson struggled as well. Having 6 in there, and the youngsters, you don't want to kill them with their workload either. I think you got to stick to the 6-man rotation. If you look at Sean Manaea's advanced stats, and I posted about this last night during the game, his strikeout rate is up. His stuff plus, which increased dramatically last year when he dropped the arm angle, much publicized, his stuff plus is just as good or better than last year's numbers. His location plus is just as good or better than last year's numbers. He's given up the home run ball more, so maybe people are just punishing the mistakes more. Maybe there's more mistakes that we can't really see in the advanced stats there. But overall, there are a lot of pieces to look at that say Sean Manaea may be getting a little unlucky. The one thing I found interesting is he's in the zone more by about 5%. His walk rate is down. His in-zone rate is up, and they're both similar numbers. I don't want Sean Manaea to walk the ballpark, but maybe he needs to pitch around the edges a little more, and maybe he needs to drop that in-zone percentage a little bit, maybe not all the way back to last year's numbers, because I did think he walked too many people last year. But that's a thing. If you're rolling your eyes at that, Tanner Scott, who struggled with LA, has talked a lot about that, how he's not walking as many people, but he's worse. He's getting killed. Sometimes being in the zone more, maybe there's too much. Maybe there's a line there, but there's a lot of things driving me crazy. I know I'm all over the place with the Mets right now, but I will start there with the pitching staff. The pitching staff is obviously the problem. Can't get deep into games. The guys we thought we could rely on at the top have been actually the most unreliable. So there's lots of things to talk about there. The bullpen has been a mess. There's really no one in the middle of that bullpen that can kind of make up for these starters not going deep into games. So I don't think there's an obvious fix, and just tweeting to get Manaea out of the rotation is not going to help.
Yeah, I agree. And the Giants, as you mentioned, 2 games back, 16 left to play. So it's not unachievable for the Mets not to make the playoffs. It would be a demise that would be something that would be talked about for a while, especially with the expanded playoffs and the amount of money spent as far as payroll. I completely agree with Manaea, and that's something I brought to the table here as well. Gave up the early damage, of course, 2-run double to Nick Castellanos and back-to-back home runs to Otto Kemp and Harrison Bader. But then he found his groove. He retired 7 straight and then struck out Bryce Harper with a runner in scoring position. He allowed 4 runs on 5 hits, went 5 innings, but there was a lot to like in between. I understand maybe you're just cherry picking some of the stats here, but to me, it wasn't about Manaea, and that's not the reason they lost. Ranger Suarez stifled them last night. No hit bid into the 5th inning, career high 12 strikeouts over 6 shutout innings. And this is a guy just allowed 4 base runners all night. So even if Manaea went out there and grinded and had a good start, yes, you'd feel better about it, but Manaea is not the reason they lost. The Mets offense should be able to get them started. At that point, Vientos snapped a 15-inning scoreless drought with the leadoff home run in the 7th, which was the 17th of the year. And you mentioned them losing again tonight. That's more of the story than just, get rid of Manaea from the rotation. Because like you said, who's getting the spot instead of Manaea? You need, and I understand this frustration in New York, and everything gets very looked at as a microscopic, put the magnifying glass on it and really have a conversation in a reactionary way. That's what sports talk radio builds their brand on. But when you want to have a realistic conversation, Sean Manaea is going to be important for what they do, just as Kota Senga is eventually going to be important this year. He will come back up. And if the Mets have a say, eventually having glory in October, both those players have to do things. And Alvarez as well, he snapped an 0 for 12 skid with a double. These players, Mark Vientos, all these guys have to do their part. It can't just be Juan Soto doing his thing with a 30-30 season. All of those things are important. Who knows? Maybe Jose Siri coming back from the IL is going to be important to them as well. These pieces have to fit into place. And for everyone in a reactionary way to just get rid of them and exile players because they struggle, Yankee fans are the same way with Devin Williams. Devin Williams has a spot on this team. It's not in high leverage situations, but he needs to get right. You can't cut your losses with these players. There is something good in these players. Manaea shows it. We saw it last night. You're not watching the game if you're not seeing that there's some good to like about what Sean Manaea is doing when he's out there. He's not completely 100% quite yet, but the Mets are better to let him work this out. And like you said, he put the Mets in a position to win that game. Offensively, the Mets should be able to score more than 4 runs. I'm sorry. That offense is built to score 6 runs a game.
I agree with you. Here's the thing. Like, a lot of it doesn't add up when you actually look at the numbers. And that's baseball. Like, as many analytics are there, you can look at the game in a lot of different ways, and it's not always going to add up. But it is frustrating when you look at this. Over the last month, the Mets have led all of Major League Baseball in WRC plus as a team at 150. The next best is the Yankees at 126. It's actually not particularly close. For the season, the Mets have the best team WRC plus in the National League at 113. It's bananas. The pitching has been really bad. 5.16 team ERA since July 9th, so about a month. But the expected ERA is 3.93, significantly lower. So again, we might be seeing a little bit of bad luck here. I know people don't want to hear that, but it is a thing. When the BABIP is incredibly high, the baseball gods are not on your side. 323 BABIP against them is the highest in Major League Baseball over this last month. The ball is finding the holes, right? It's landing in front and behind of the outfielders, in between them, everything you can imagine. A measly 63.1% left on base percentage by the pitching staff over the last month, which means they just cannot get out of trouble at all. Like you see some teams and some individual pitchers who are up in the high 70s, in the 80s sometimes. So 63.1, I hope that's unsustainable in a good way where that number goes up. Like I will say the one guy I don't think you can keep on putting out there is Ryan Helsley. This dude, they've put him in low leverage situations now. If you think Devin Williams has been bad, watch Ryan Helsley in one of these games. I believe he at least gave up a home run again tonight in a game that was already lost, but he just looks like a completely different dude and thought it was tipping. I don't know if it's that because he can't seem to correct it. Here's the other thing, the roster, like you have some kind of the combinations you have on this team are fantastic. 4 players on offense in the top 20 as far as home runs in the National League. Soto, Alonso, Lindor, Nimmo, all in the top 20 in home runs in the National League. 3 players in the top 20 National League WRC plus. Soto, Alonso, Lindor. 3 players in the top 25 F4 in the National League. Same 3 guys. 3 players in the top 15 NL OPS in high leverage situations. McNeil, Soto, Alonso, all top 15 in that split of high leverage. I've heard a lot of people saying the Mets are not clutch. A lot of these guys have actually been pretty clutch on offense if you look at the whole season. A lot of it Soto, Lindor, Alonso, but other guys have done well. Vientos has been great lately. Luis Torrens, before he got hurt, was looking great. Beatty's been better than projected. Alvarez, I know, is just frustratingly streaky, but he's had his moments too. Like, this seems like a team that should have a better record. And again, I do think it's more pitching, but the offense is frustratingly inconsistent. That kind of baseball comes and goes, hot streaks, cold streaks. They just are the perfect example of a team who I don't think in many months have put it together at the same time. Hitting, clutch hitting, starting pitching, bullpen. They haven't, I don't even think they've had 2 of the 4 in the last 3 months at the same time. That's what it feels like.
For sure. And I think everyone that watches their team, baseball's a regional sport, so we all follow our teams closely, but every single team in the war of attrition that is a 162 game season goes through moments like this. The Mets feel like it's been extended and they need to stop the bleeding at some point to just revive themselves. And it feels like we haven't had the good vibes in Queens in quite some time. And luckily they built themselves on this really safety net to keep them afloat, because this is in parts of the season where they've looked lost and they could have been buried already. And they're buried in the NL East at this point. They're 10 games back. There's no way they're catching the Phillies in the division, even though the Phillies haven't clinched. It's just a foregone conclusion. But I think similar to the Yankees, where there are points of the season where they don't look competitive. And there was a large portion of the Yankee season where, we'll talk about the Blue Jays broadcast booth talking about them, where the Yankees have been a non-playoff team, going 21-30 over the course of a 50 game stretch. Just that, to me, I understand there are spurts and there are cold streaks, but some of it's revealing to a team. And the Yankees, to me, on the other side of it, I know they've lost 2 straight Detroit, and this week was a huge test for them with Toronto and with Houston, and it will continue this weekend with Boston. Losing 2 or 3 or potentially being swept by Detroit is damning. It's not good. But the Yankees have righted a lot of wrongs by really overcoming some adversity. The Mets need to have some of that, galvanize them. I'm not sure what they need to do it. The Phillies have their number this year. It's the last team you want to see on the other side of the field for whatever reason.
I don't know. Not at Citi Field. We have owned the Phillies.
In Philly. There's something like a bugaboo thing at Citizens Bank Park where they just feel like they can't get it done.
Let me just ask you this. We'll end the conversation this because we have a lot more to talk about here. And don't just give me the answer you think I want to hear. Like, in your heart, do you think the San Francisco Giants are a better team than the New York Mets?
I do not. I don't think they're well-rounded. The Devers thing to me was so out of left field.
Incredible.
He's been great.
He's been incredible.
Spoiler alert, he's in my red hot. I'll talk about his numbers in the past 15 games. It's been remarkable to see. But to me, them trading for him put a lot of lipstick on what was a team that was ill-constructed in the first place. And there's a lot of holes in that team. I think way more holes than they have in the Mets lineup.
Do you think the Cincinnati Reds are a better team than the Mets?
They are not. But with the expanded playoffs, the Reds are a playoff team. But the Mets should be laughing in that first wild card spot, in my opinion.
All I'll say is I still have the belief if the Mets can get in, why wouldn't they be a dangerous team? Like, they should still be a very dangerous team. Obviously not if they're playing like they are currently, but like, I still think they have that power. I'll just end it on this. That safety net you're talking about, it's got some holes in it. And it's like the holes are expanding very quickly.
The boat is being filled with water, and it's about getting the water out. Plugging the hole is the main thing. but the ship is sinking if you don't plug it quickly. But let's head over to the Framber Valdez situation. At this point, it's a week removed, about a week,
Yeah.
maybe 8 days and change, but we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss it. If you guys missed at Dyken Park, we saw the situation. Framber Valdez throwing that 92.8 mile per hour sinker at Cesar Salazar's chest, crossing him up, and it looked like he was potentially doing it in a reactionary way. We had a lot of the fallout in the media. You mentioned baseball media moving very fast. Salazar himself tried to shoulder the blame. He talked about pitch com being an issue here. But to me, you watch it optically, bases loaded walk, pair of singles, and then the grand slam that was hit into the Crawford boxes. You could see Framber Valdez being frustrated. And 2 pitches later, Salazar asked for a curveball. Instead, he was greeted with a fastball that was hurled directly at him. Salazar looked at him in shock. It looked like, and then Valdez turned his back and walked down the mound. To me, and I understand the Astros having the closed door meeting and try to get ahead of it, and they did. The story died at this point because we're 8 days removed from it. It did not look like miscommunication to me. It really looked like this was a lapse in character for a guy that has similar situations. Valdez has always had elite stuff. One of the best sinkers in baseball, but the questions have never been about his ability. There's been a lot of conversations in Houston. You can dig into it about his temperament. He's talked about defensive positioning. He lets emotions spill over in the game. And he appears to me to have crossed the line by directing his frustration at a teammate. His free agency is looming. To me, he's not a Houston Astro next year. He's going to be looking for a contract that's similar to Max Fried's $218 million deal. I don't think he gets it, but the front office are watching closely because they're measuring velocities, spin rates, and if he's going to help a team win baseball games, he's going to get paid. He will get paid somewhere down the line. But I think right now, looking at this, the spotlight on him like this, intentional or not, and I believe it was intentional, I think looking at the trust with the team, character plays a part here, and this stuff looms large. And I would be curious 10 years down the line, any of these Houston Astros players that retire that want to talk about players, stories will come out about this. And I think Salazar did the right thing, but there's something nefarious about what was done. Just his reaction, reading body language. You don't have to be an expert to see this was purposeful. And it was to me, and again, it became a non-story a couple days later, but this was a huge thing 2 days later that could have blown up a clubhouse. And maybe it is right now. We don't know.
Yeah. Let me be clear here. There's no doubt it's 100% on purpose. And there's a couple giveaways. They can say whatever they want to say in the post game. But there's a couple giveaways here. Number one, there's no immediate apology on Valdez's part. It's usually an easy, like, tap the chest, my bad. Right. Or maybe we meet at the mound, talk it out. Like, what happened there? Nothing. Like you said, Framber turns his back, has a scowl on his face. And the catcher's reaction also is like immediately, like, what the hell was that? Second thing, cross-ups should almost never and maybe never happen anymore. Pitch com. Like, it's not I forgot the sign. I mixed up the sign. Pitch com. Like, come on now. It's 100% on purpose, which is pretty damn Bush League, man. You can be as mad as you want about whatever communication or miscommunication is happening with your catcher. And I wanted this pitch. You wanted that pitch. This pitch gets hit over the wall, blah, blah, blah. You hash that stuff out in the bullpen or in the dugout between innings, or go down the tunnel if you're going to get a little angry with each other and get in each other's face. What he did is completely Bush League, and apparently it's already been reported that at least one team is already out on him in free agency because of this incident. At least that's what's being reported. I agree with you. I think he's gone from Houston. This is not the only issue we've had here with him. If you're paying attention, if you're excusing Framber for this, you are a homer. Maybe not just a Houston homer, but like a Framber Valdez biggest fan. Like, you're in denial here. This was a bad moment from him. He's had his struggles lately, so I guess frustration's building, but I don't think there's a ton to talk about with it because it's been talked about so much, and unfortunately kind of people moved on, but it's just 100% on purpose. You can't convince me otherwise.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's definitely a story that with the baseball media and the Astros, they handled it the right way. Salazar, more importantly, handled it the right way. Like we said, he took accountability. He actually said, I hit the wrong pitch com button. And the thing is, too, you mentioned they'll having issues if PitchCom does exist. We've seen broadcasts where the PitchCom's not working and players tapping on their hat, and the pitcher is usually like, I can't hear you, or whatever it is. There was none of that. There was no sort of reaction that you would think that he's being apologetic, turning his back and just looking malicious for what he was doing. And we're lucky that Salazar didn't get hurt, because this could have hit him in the throat. And like, obviously not expecting his own pitcher to be doing that. So not a good situation. But speaking of not a good situation, we have the news that's dropping about the Detroit Tigers, and the stuff that we're seeing here is not great. We had an extensive investigation revealing a troubling pattern in the Ilitch Sports and Entertainment, otherwise known as IC&E, which is the corporate arm behind the Detroit Tigers, the Red Wings, Comerica Park, Little Caesars Arena, etc. And this report was built entirely on testimony from more than 45 current and former Detroit employees, which details allegations of mistreatment of women by multiple high-ranking executives and employees. So the biggest part of the story here, there's a lot to break down here, but the Cameron Maybin piece is interesting. And we have a lot of familiarity with the Cameron Maybin, of course, former Yankees, Mets, Tigers outfielder. He transitioned to broadcasting 2023. He was one of the players named. So during his only season as a pre and post game analyst for Bally Sports Detroit, he allegedly directed inappropriate comments and advances towards female colleagues. An instance included one employee that he enjoyed, quote, watching her walk away, sending late night messages. You guys can kind of fill in the blanks for the rest. HR officials began collecting accounts on Maybin's behavior midway through the season, yet he remained on broadcast through 2023 because his contract was allowed to quietly expire. This is a broader pattern, and I know the Detroit Tigers have come out and they reaffirmed that this is not an issue that is widespread. But Maybin is only one of 8 individuals tied to the Tigers operations accused of misconduct. We have 4 vice presidents and other senior staff, including in the findings. We got allegations ranging from inappropriate comments to physical confrontations, while we had some executives facing suspensions quietly, and then they've been asked to leave the organization. We do have some of the 8 still employed and even promoted despite multiple complaints. So it feels like we have a cultural problem in Detroit.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. With the Maybin thing, first of all, obviously, I think we do believe in innocent until proven guilty, but some of this is pretty damning. The Maybin stuff, if true, I remember when he left the Yes Network, the Yankees network, he's kind of been begging ever since then for like a job somewhere. I've seen him on Twitter all the time, basically kind of like how am I not employed for like a bigger baseball job because I'm so good at this. Like, he seems like he's very confident in himself. Well, I don't know why the Yes thing was weird, because he was there, he's brought on, and it was kind of well established that he was being brought on, and then like he suddenly just like was gone. You got to wonder. I hate that you go there, but like you got to wonder, were there some things he was doing that the Yankees were not a big fan of? We're just like, all right, we're not going to go that route. If he doesn't know right from wrong in that area, that's a shame. I think the most recent thing I've seen him do is work for Foul Territory, which obviously brings a lot of former ball players on. It's interesting because this is going to connect to a conversation later about analysts of former ball players, non-players. Listen, man, you can't just expect to get a premier job because you're a former ball player if you're not a good employee. Like, that's a different world. So obviously, I hope it's untrue, but there's a lot of stuff there that doesn't necessarily make you believe that. You said a cultural problem. Definitely. Let's not forget, back in April, the Tigers' then assistant general manager, Sam Menzin, was fired for sending lewd photos to people. For some reason, I haven't seen that in a lot of these reports of like, hey, this happened not that long ago too. So yeah, it certainly seems that like the Tigers have a problem on their hands here. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it is a sobering realization that it's widespread across different assets of things that we talk about, and baseball is one of them, and baseball organizations, where you have a troubling misuse of influence, and this happens across all different spots, and it's something you don't want to see. And I think the Tigers have to get ahead of this. The report I read for them defending the organization, of course, they don't want to admit that there's this widespread issue, but I want to see more accountability on their end, because they need to pride themselves on being a place that people can work safely and not worry about things like this interfering with their day-to-day job. And for people, male, female, however you identify, going into work and being exposed to things that make you uncomfortable, and just because, and feeling like you can't say anything because they're vice presidents or they're former players or they're analysts, that needs to be out of the game completely. It needs to be out of the world completely. And to hear this, it's disheartening, because Cameron Maybin, in my opinion, like, people were celebrating his versatility as a player, but also being in broadcasting. He's personable. He felt insightful. And this is just disheartening to hear.
Yeah, we'll see what comes of it. Obviously, I'm sure there'll be a follow-up on the story in some degree at some point. I don't know when, but and when it happens, we'll cover it more. Again, innocent until proven guilty. But the end message here is this stuff needs to be out of the game, and like you said, kind of out of everything else. Like, let's grow up.
So we also had some injuries discussed here as well. And the conversation we really want to have is just identifying which one stands out the most. So of course, we have injuries to Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette, Dustin May, Michael Wacha, Trey Turner, and Alec Boehm. Daniel Palencia as well as hurt. And I'll start here talking about the one that stands out most to me because we saw it happen against the Yankees. It's Bo Bichette. We saw the cluster of injuries come out here, the knee sprain into the slide into Austin Wells padding. To me, it feels like the most consequential. I think the Blue Jays have built their identity around the consistency, and I think Bo Bichette has been nothing but that for him. He's been a leader in the clubhouse. He's been reliable in the field. A great season for Bo. We talked about this. Go back in our prior episodes talking about whether he's a superstar or not and what kind of contract will look. We compared him to Trey Turner. I think the season has been all that and more for Bo Bichette, and I'm interested to see how free agency plays out for him. That being said, this is the very moment Toronto needs him most. Obviously, the Yankees breathing down their neck. They're losing 2 from Detroit. Been a problem, but the Yankees are in shouting distance of a division title again, where Toronto had a chance to run away, losing 2 of 3. And I don't think it is a coincidence that you start losing games when Bo Bichette's not in the lineup. I think this timing cannot be worse for them. I think September they need them. The AL East is in the balance, and his absence doesn't really just subtract a bat. It unsettles the rhythm of the entire roster because I think he is the heartbeat for them. And that might be an exaggeration for people that are looking at it, but the Jays have depth and they will replace his offensive production. But I don't think they have a player that ties everything seamlessly offensively and defensively. I think he's so important to what they do.
Yeah, so this is a tough one because there's some big names here. I mean, Kyle Tucker, obviously probably the biggest name there. You could easily go with that and his production. And Cubs fans were a little annoyed that they kind of let him sit there not on the IL for a few days before they finally made the decision to put him on because they have some talented players down at AAA that could help instead of just kind of letting him rot there. I know they're annoyed about that. Apparently that happens in Chicago a lot where they kind of drag their heels a little bit on these injury situations instead of being decisive. His teammate Daniel Palencia, listen, it's been much publicized. The Cubs for a couple years now have really had a hard time figuring out the back end of the bullpen. Palencia has kind of done a good job there. So if his injury ends up being of the serious variety, that's tricky for them. The reason I'm not going to go with one of those guys as most impactful is because I kind of think the Cubs' playoff position is kind of set. I don't think they're coming back to win that division, and the teams behind them aren't exactly like trying to jump above them for that wild card spot. And even if they do, I don't think it changes much. Like, I don't think they're going to fall down to the last wild card spot. It's basically what I'm trying to say. Trey Turner's been fantastic. Reborn defensively. He was awful, like the worst defensive shortstop in the league last year. Suddenly this year, the numbers are great and hitting above 300. He's had a great year. The hamstring has been something he's dealt with before. Apparently this is of the lesser variety than it was last year when it hampered him towards the end. But I'm going to agree with you here. All that being said, I do think it's Bo Bichette. You mentioned most of it already. I'll just add a little bit to it. Obviously, the first parameter is because that race is still close, right? Yanks got killed again tonight, but Toronto lost as well to Houston in a close game. So I believe the lead is, what'd you say, 3?
Yeah, it's 3 games right now.
Okay, so still very, very close as far as the division goes. He's been not just great, he's been clutch. You said he kind of connects it all together. I agree with you, but he's been clutch, one of the most, if not the most clutch player in the major leagues. He leads all of Major League Baseball in RBIs with runners in scoring position, 80. Highest WRC plus in the entire league with runners in scoring position. That's a good place to be to find yourself. So I do think it's a terrible time for the Blue Jays to lose a player like that.
No, for sure. And I think we're going to continue to watch. And looking at where they stand and positionally in these players, like the Phillies right now, losing Trey Turner and Alec Boehm, that's a huge deal. But you got to look contextually where the Phillies are just cruising, and it's like everyone plugs and plays. And I think if they lost Schwarber, different story. And in a different world, Trey Turner could be the MVP of this season, but it's just the way offensively things are being built out because he's having a remarkable season that no one is talking about. But Trey Turner's been absolutely revolutionary as far as how he was able to turn around his defensive game from last year, as you mentioned, and continue to just be a hitting machine. I think he leads the league in hits currently, right?
I haven't looked, but he probably does. He's, it was publicized for a while. The National League barely had anyone hitting over 300. And he, I believe at one point was hitting 301. So he's up there. So if he's not the leader in hits, he's got to be close.
All right, well, let's head to our next segment. And you worded it, what's the word? It's in honor of, pardon the interruption, being renewed by ESPN, which is great news, by the way. ESPN signing a new 3-year deal for that show. One of the bright spots on ESPN that is floundering as far as conversation. And, WWE being added to the app, not enough to get me to spend $30. I got 3 letters for everybody. It's called VPN. But, Devin, let's talk about what's the word. Let's start it off here.
All right, so we're going to put a few topics. We'll each give you the word that comes to mind to describe it. The first one, and I posted about this on X and Instagram yesterday. What's the word for Drew Gilbert of the San Francisco Giants? His antics, mostly in the dugout, whether it be the choking, he's having guys choke him, he's barking like a dog, kind of shaking the fence. I'm sure most people, if you're listening to this show, you've seen highlights of Drew Gilbert's antics. What's your word for that?
My word was eccentric. And I think one of the comments, the top comment on our Twitter feed at Tablesetters Pod, was baseball needs more characters, and Drew Gilbert happens to be a great character. And if he can live up to the billing on the field, I think this has the ability to be something fun, as long as it's, for lack of a better word, consensual with the choking stuff going on. But it is weird for sure. But baseball thrives in weird oddities, and this is the weirdest celebration I think I've ever seen. Been watching baseball for almost 30 years, so it's eccentric, and it's something that I've never seen before.
Yeah, that's a good one. Mine. It's crazy. You've never seen it in baseball. Like, you got to be a little crazy for that to be
outside of Papelbon and Harper situation, but that was not.
Yeah, but that was actually exactly. My word is polarizing, because I think you're going to be on one. Most people are going to be on one side of the fence or the other. I put a poll up on Instagram, like, do you love it or do you hate it? I was pretty much 50-50. It's so out there. If it was just like he's a rah-rah guy and all that stuff, I think most people would love it. I think this, especially the choking stuff, some people are going to be like, what the hell is that? So even me, I'm having trouble figuring out. I'm going to be honest. I don't think I like it. To me, it's a little annoying. I know a lot of Met fans are looking at it like, oh my God, we traded this guy away. Like, we need his energy. Maybe the Mets could definitely use a rah-rah guy. I've talked about that before, but I don't know. Over the top, polarizing, just because it's going to split people. Some people are going to love it, and I think the people that don't like it are going to absolutely hate it.
So the next one here is, what's the word for the Blue Jays announcer Buck Martinez saying, quote, the Yankees are just not a good team. And just for context, he had said this live on the broadcast, seeing the Yankees update for their score. This was not on an opinion-based radio show. What's your word to talk about this?
I'm going to go with unwarranted. I just don't think it's his job. They're not even playing the Yankees at the time. I know they just finished up a series with them not too long before it. Listen, I am no Yankee fan. Everybody knows that, but I don't understand it. You can report on what the score is, right? Because they're in contention with each other here. That's fine. But to just go on a little bit of a rant of like, they don't do this well, they don't do that well. If they don't hit home runs, they can't win. It's unwarranted. And to be honest, if I was a Blue Jay fan, I would hate this. Maybe it's the Met fan in me who believe I have some superstitions. I don't like poking the bear. Like, every single Yankee heard this today. And if there was ever bulletin board material, this is it. What's your word for this?
It was petty. And I think it makes you seem like a little brother, where like you're in first place, enjoy it and act like you've been there before. And the Blue Jays are having a great season. I already discussed Bo Bichette and the things they've done. They've built a very well-rounded, deep team. But for your announcer to go out there and rah-rah and say that the Yankees aren't a good team, the record says otherwise. Wins do mean something. I understand the Yankees are a flawed team. You can have that conversation, but to celebrate the loss and just to go on a rant about the Yankees not being a good team, it's not based in distruth. I think there is truth to what he was saying. It's just the way he said it. And
Agreed.
Toronto dunking on the Yankees is not a good look. And if you're creating bulletin board material for the Yankees, as you mentioned, in their dugout, and having them rally behind this, it's the worst thing for Blue Jays. You don't want to wake up a sleeping giant. There's plenty of people in that lineup. Historically, we may have 5 30 home run hitters in that lineup that will thrash you on any given night. You're especially losing 2 or 3 just recently against you. It just comes off very off base and weird. And again, people were comparing this to Michael Kay talking about the Blue Jays not being as well-rounded or playing above their head. But Michael Kay said this on his editorial radio show. He did not say it on the Yes Network. 2 different things. Michael Kay, the Yankee play-by-play announcer, is different than Michael Kay, the radio personality. Those are two different things. If Buck Martinez wants to get on ESPN Toronto and have these conversations, there has to be some decorum for the broadcast, and it just came off as fandom, and it was just weird.
Yeah, if it was just something quick and simple, like, man, the Yanks really struggle to win a game when they play sloppy baseball or something like that.
Yeah.
But like he just kind of went at it like a big critique. So yeah, just out of place. I think those words, unwarranted, petty, definitely fit the crime there. Our next one here for what's the word. So there was a report of, I think 4 days ago now, the Rockies on the verge of their 102nd loss at the time of the season draw an easy 43,461 crowd for tonight's divisional matchup against the Padres. So what's your word for the Rockies, who are over 100 losses already, continuing to draw?
Admirable. I love this from the Rockies fan base. And as I mentioned in the opening of the show, a lot of things to distract you. Maybe you want to be distracted from Bo Nix and his week 1 performance. The Broncos got the win, but Bo Nix definitely disappointing some fantasy owners, and he'll be fine, by the way. I think it's awesome. It shows that baseball has flourished there since the early 90s when the Rockies have grown there. I think the demise of that market is largely exaggerated. I think people really underestimate how attached Denver and Colorado is to their Rockies. It's cemented into the fabric of who they are. And for a fan base to show up when good times, it's easy. Players are winning. It's exciting. Pop the jersey on. But for you to be drawing crowds, it's not just about cherry picking giveaway days and things like that, or bringing concerts or fireworks nights. They're showing up to watch their Rockies on a given night. And to me, that's admirable, especially where you're going to be losing over 100 games. Shout out to the diehards in Denver. This is something I love to see, because you look at Camden Yards right now, it was popping off. It was an electric factory in Baltimore. Mm. It's a ghost town now, and deservedly so. The ownership deserves a lot of slings and arrows, but they're not showing up the same way the Rockies are showing up, which is wild to think about.
Yeah, my word for this is confusing, because I need to talk to these people to kind of really figure out why people are still turning out. And they're not drawing 43,000 every night. Like, if you look at the numbers, I believe the average is around 30,000. I can pull up the list in a minute. But it's a little confusing. It's interesting. So, someone quoted that post that I just read about them drawing 43,000 the other night. Lindy Man is the title, at Paul Scalise. It got a lot of play here. And I quoted it as well and gave my opinion. He said, baseball is not selling you a sport. It is selling you a warm summer night outside. A ballpark is supposed to be a setting for summer. You don't even have to pay attention. You can just take in the atmosphere or walk around, eat, whatever. If a team has low attendance, it means the stadium is wrong. The neighborhood it sits in is wrong. It is a referendum on placemaking. I wholeheartedly disagree on this. I think I called it a blanket statement. I don't disagree that they're selling you a nice summer night. I think that's true partly, but to kind of just say they're not selling you a sport is going too far. And to say if you're not drawing, you're just in the wrong place, I don't think that's necessarily true too. Like, I don't believe the A's were in the wrong place in Oakland. I believe their ownership self-destructed on purpose, right? I don't, as much as I like to shit on St. Louis, everyone knows that if you listen to this show, I don't think the Cardinals are suddenly in the wrong place because they're not drawing. I think they've been boringly mediocre for a while, and sometimes mediocre is worse than just straight up bad. I think they're fine there. So yes, any given night, if you go to a ballpark and it's pretty packed, it's a mix of people that are just there for a summer night. It's a mix of people that are passionate baseball fans that are going to sit there and, yeah, they're going to watch almost every single play. It's a mix of people, maybe people just wanting to bring their kids to experience it, to do something different and get out of the house. But I'm not buying into the fact that it is not purposeful for sport to watch it. So the Rockies, I don't know. Is it cheap beer? I've heard they sell things for pretty cheap there. Is it not as many things in town for them to get to or compete with? I would like to see the numbers on Sundays when the Broncos are playing and see what those numbers are there. But overall, I'd like to agree with you and say it's admirable, but I want to know what the recipe for this is. Is it things that they are doing that is drawing people to the ballpark? Because I'd understand it if they've been pretty good for the last several years and then this year was just a down year, but they've been bad and they haven't tried to get better. So, like, I don't know if that's good for the sport or not. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of maybe conflicted is a better word for me.
No, for sure. And they sit 15th overall in general attendance across, and they stand above teams like the Detroit Tigers, like the aforementioned St. Louis Cardinals, the Arizona Diamondbacks, Cincinnati Reds, the Cleveland Guardians, the aforementioned Baltimore Orioles. So they're doing something right. And whether it is cheap beer or selling them the atmosphere, I've been to Denver. There's plenty to do. There's a lot of great nature. There's a lot of great nightlife as far as bars go. We mentioned football as well. They got a great fucking hockey team too. Let's not forget that. So there's a
That's
lot to
true.
do. They're not playing right now, by the way. But the thing is, there's a lot to do in Denver, uh, and they're choosing to watch their Rockies. And I think to me, it is really the roadmap for fan bases to take ownership of being like, we're going to grind with this team. And I understand setting the stage and you're reinforcing bad habits like the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Oakland Athletic situation, showing up regardless kind of reinforces like, oh, we don't have to spend. People are going to show up anyway. And that's kind of the conversation we had about the Knicks back in the day of like their biggest star is MSG and they don't need to be good because they have sold out games every single night at the Garden. But to me, this is more the situation of like, for me, it's enlightening that Denver is a better baseball market than people anticipated as a franchise that is still in its infancy. If you really think about it, they, expansion team back in the 90s, a team like it's also enlightening to compare them with this steadfast anchor in baseball, the quote unquote best fans in baseball, the Cardinals. You're being outdrawn by the Colorado Rockies who are losing 100 games. Like that
Yikes.
should be a little bit sobering. Like you said, yikes, what's going on in St. Louis and Big Mac land?
All right, let's get to the last one here because we still have a couple of segments that we want to get to. And this one is not baseball, it's semi-baseball related. It's just really the world of sports. All right, so Peter Schrager was brought over to ESPN for football coverage from the NFL Network, which NFL Network, if you haven't watched their football programming, I feel like very light and fun, in my opinion. I love their coverage. I'd pick them over any of the others, ESPN, CBS, Fox. So I was a little worried about a guy like Peter Schrager going over to ESPN. Sure enough, one of his first big appearances, Ryan Clark completely discounts his opinion on something. And this is what Ryan Clark said, because Schrager didn't play. So what's your word for Ryan Clark basically just telling Peter Schrager his opinion didn't count because he didn't play?
Yeah, my word was off base. And I think that this is a huge issue to discuss. Ryan Clark rubbing people the wrong way. And there's a lot of really meaningful conversation behind the scenes that maybe Ryan Clark is going to be removed from ESPN because of things like this. I thought it was flat out dumb. I mean, it was disrespectful. I think it undercuts the very foundation of sports media because I think fans tune in because they want different voices. Of course, there's value in the ex-player that put on the pads and they've been in the locker room, they've done the things, and we see it all across the board doing a great job. Tony Romo, Tom Brady, Greg Olson, et cetera, et cetera. There's a spot in baseball, but there's also a really good spot for the insider who can explain what's going on or why a front office made this or having connections. And I think Ryan Clark, by saying this, really told viewers that one half of the conversation doesn't matter. I think to me, it's lazy. It's insecure on his end because he was losing the argument. And the way Peter Schrager handled it was beautiful. I know that Peter Schrager is, if you watch NFL Network, like you mentioned, he is one of those guys that has connections. He has access. He reports on things that are factual based. And he knows things that Clark just doesn't know because I think that's why their perspectives do work beautifully together. And when you're losing an argument, it's easy for you to say, well, I played and you didn't. And it comes off as like you wouldn't understand type of thing. And it just, to me, is honestly, it's one of the best arguments that come from challenging someone's point is expecting, like, I'm bringing this to perspective. If you're sitting at a panel on ESPN, by discrediting your opponent, you're making yourself look lesser than. And I just thought this was awful. And this is you also got to compare that he sits across the desk from Stephen A. Smith as well and never called Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith has never played anything but high school basketball in his life. Why does his opinion matter more than Peter Schrager? Peter Schrager has been doing this for a very long time in a reputable way. So I think it left a mark in a bad way. And I thought it was very, very off base, to go back to my word for this.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and give you two. Self-important is one of my words. The other is obnoxious. And this is what he's been recently. I mean, just the day before, I believe he said that he didn't think Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Drew Brees were generational quarterbacks, and that one got everyone's attention. I don't think Ryan Clark's a bad person, but he has too often. It seems like he's just trying to get clicks or something. I don't know. To me, there's already too many former athletes that get these jobs too easily that are no good. Don't get me wrong. There are some that are fantastic and a lot. I think there's more good ones than bad ones. But every once in a while, I'm like, man, there are so many people probably with some kind of degree that they went to try to do this kind of coverage that are not even getting a sniff because so many of the jobs are given to ex-athletes. I mean, we saw years ago. Remember when Jason Witt, or is it Jason? Is Jason Witten? I feel like I'm messing up his first name. Was put in the Monday Night Football booth just because Tony Romo, his teammate the year before, was good. Like, it's crazy how easy some of these guys get jobs. I think sports coverage works best when you have a pretty much a 50-50 mix of former athletes and non-athletes. I just feel like you get the whole perspective. And yeah, it's the cheapest argument he could possibly go with at any time. I'm sure most of these guys are trained. Like, the one place you don't go, you don't discredit your own, like you said, you don't discredit your colleague. To go back to wrestling, we love to sneak wrestling into this show. If we want to do a little inside wrestling here, if you really know wrestling, you'll hear guys say, like, when you're cutting a promo on somebody, you don't want to just say all terrible things about them and say you're weak and you're pathetic and you're awful. No, you're going to sneak in some things to build this guy up because it makes it look like a bigger deal if you then go on to beat this person. Like, it's character work. Same thing should happen on a debate show. Like, you can argue and argue against what someone's saying, but it should not be a personal attack because then it just looks like, all right, well, why are we watching this guy? I'm going to change the channel. And by the way, I usually do change the channel when it's ESPN, unless it's PTI with Tony Kornheiser and Wilbon, who are two guys that I don't think their coverage is perfect. I think there's some things they try to cover that they clearly are not too knowledgeable about, but I would give them the time of day. Other than that, I'm usually changing the channel.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of finish this off, I think that argument is just so reductive, and Ryan Clark has put his place on this media spot that you're too smart, you're too experienced to be going down to that level. And he did apologize for it, but I think it did leave a mark and people are rubbed the wrong way by something like this. And you could have won the argument with football logic. And even if people disagree with you, it's fine, but don't really discredit Peter Schrager for a career he's made. He's made a living doing this for a very long time, built a lot of trust. Adam Schefter, these other guys that are being out there, there's a place in the media for non-players. And it's the same thing with pro wrestling. There's people that talk about the same thing. When you go on conversation and discuss pro wrestling, there will be the same argument. Well, you've never done it. How do you know? And there is a gatekeeping aspect to it as well, where Ryan Clark has to understand that there is a media credential that is deserved. And these guys have made their way. They weren't just gifted the spot. He has knowledge of football that sometimes, and we also talk about baseball announcers. Majority of baseball announcers have not played themselves. There's a lot of guys out there that add color, and some of them are former players or they go on to do different roles in the game. There's got to be in place for non-players because they see it from a different perspective, which is just as valuable.
Agreed. I mean, I love watching MLB Network's coverage in a lot of different ways. And a lot of times it's Greg Amsinger, who is non-player, with Harold Reynolds and a couple other guys. It's my favorite panels sometimes. And Amsinger does not try to hold back and just direct the show like some people do. He has strong opinions, and these other guys might be able to tear him apart for some of them. They don't. They always have a good time with each other, and they never take him down. They allow his opinions just because he's a non-player. I mean, listen, you and I watched the game of baseball on a nightly basis for years. Like, I would put our show up against a lot of players that have baseball podcasts. Literally, we're not going to have the audience that they get automatically because of these big names. But seriously, I've listened to plenty of them. I would put our stuff and other people's stuff of non-player podcasts that I've listened to against a lot of player podcasts and say that it's better. Seriously.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I think that conversation needs to be reciprocal, and you need to have respect for the other counterpart. He's sitting in that seat for a reason. For you to just say that he doesn't have value, you could see Peter Schrager's face like, what are we doing here? But either way, let's move ahead to our Twitter polls and conversations and move ahead with our show. All right, as Devin mentioned before, we are posting conversation on our Twitter page at Tablesetters Pod, and you posted 2 polls that had some results here that yielded some interesting conversation.
Yeah, so these were both, I believe, last week after our last episode. So they're at least around a week old. So again, these answers to these polls could change in a couple days' time, but I'm going to just run them by you, and I want you to tell me if you agree with what the audience voted for here. The first one was, if they were to make it, which of these teams would be the biggest threat in the playoffs? The Mariners, Rangers, Rays, or Royals? Mariners win easily here, 49% of the vote. Got a lot of people participating in this one. Rangers came up next, 24%. Rays and Royals, 14%, 13%. Do you agree with the Mariners being the most dangerous team out of those four?
I still do, despite them struggling and wanting to give away that playoff spot. I think that they still are the favorite in that poll, and I would vote for them. The Rangers have emerged as a little bit more of a threat. Maybe I give them a little bit more of the percentage points, but the M's are still, to me, as far as that pitching staff goes, we mentioned that trio. I think they're the most dangerous. But if DeGrom gets going and he can carry them, who else knows? But the Rangers are playing good ball right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think clearly it's the Mariners, the most complete team. I know they don't always put it together, but pitching staff's dangerous. Josh Naylor's been playing great. Julio Rodriguez has been fantastic in the second half. I think, honestly, I think it's pretty obvious that out of those four, they're the most dangerous. The other question we asked, and we're going back to the NL MVP vote, we're not asking who you would vote for, who the MVP is. Simply, with the game on the line, which of these players would you want at the plate? Shohei Ohtani, Kyle Schwarber, or Juan Soto? Ohtani gets 47% of the vote. Schwarber, 25%. Soto, 28%. It's a tricky one. Do you agree with the answer? Shohei Ohtani is the audience's answer?
Yeah, with these polls, I go with my gut. I know you could probably look at the advanced stats of big games and clutch moments and what their percentage of success rate. All three of these guys have a history of succeeding in tense moments. Ohtani gets my eye test. I feel like the numbers would support that as well. I'm not sure if the divide is as much as 47% to 28 and 25, but I think Ohtani, to me, feels like he's the most clutch and who I'd want at the plate. Schwarber being below Soto is interesting, but I guess Soto still has the track record of being in big moments as well. Last year with the Yankees, and of course the Nationals World Series run has proved it. Schwarber had big moments as well. So these three guys, you wouldn't go wrong with putting any of these guys up in a big moment at the plate.
I'm taking Soto, and you could call it bias as the Met fan, but a lot of it's based on his non-Mets tenure. Watching him with the Yankees last year in the playoffs, I mean, unbelievable at times. I'll never forget that home run against the Guardians. Just like you could tell he was locked in, and sure enough, he was. And yeah, going back to 2019 with the Nationals as such a young kid, just being unbelievable. Wasn't there something with, was this the Astros Dodgers or was it Nationals Astros? I feel like I remember Soto like carrying his bat down to first base running there because someone on the other team did it, or maybe it was vice versa. But
that was the Nationals Astros World Series.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm right. I don't know. I just feel like he's built for that stuff. And plus, if you want to get in the analytics, as far as those three guys, lowest strikeout rate, Soto. Like he has I'm not saying he never strikes out. I've seen him strike out in big moments. But as far as the hardest to strike out, who's probably going to put the ball in play and hopefully make something happen, I'm taking Soto, and I feel strongly about that. I'm not saying he's the best player amongst the three, but in a do or die playoff moment, I want it to be Soto.
Well, being that we have extended past the hour and a half, we're going to move right to our coming around third segment here and talk about what we're looking forward to for the rest of the week around baseball. We will return our red hot ice cold segment next week, but we want to discuss what's coming up this weekend. You already mentioned DeGrom being on the Mountain City field. We already talked about the Yankees and the Red Sox. Is there something else on your mind you want to discuss as we look ahead to this weekend and beyond?
I'm just going to go back to DeGrom again, and I'll expand on it. Basically, I just think it's such a special moment. I think the fans are going to give him a very warm reception, even though the Mets are in a bad place, which can sometimes change the mood of the crowd. DeGrom just meant so much to this fan base, and I think some of the unhappiness when he left, I think, is worn off. I think most Met fans, I think the majority, root for him now. I compare it a little bit to when Mike Piazza came back, I think, with the Padres, and I remember he hit one home run and the crowd went crazy, and he had a second home run and they like kind of playfully booed him. I don't think that Mets team was in contention, so that does affect it too. Like the Mets certainly don't want DeGrom to beat them on Friday. DeGrom against Jonah Tong, one of the young kids up here, that is special. We all hope that Jonah Tong is a guy that maybe can have a big impact. Maybe it's hard to say he can have as big an impact as Jacob DeGrom did, but maybe can be a future ace like DeGrom was for all those years. So I think it's special. I know I've heard Gary Cohen wonder, like, are they going to play simple man for him when he takes the mound as an opposing player? I think they will. I'm sure there'll be a great tribute package to him. I know they do a good job with that kind of stuff. And DeGrom said, he's like, I think he was just quoted recently saying, Mets fans were always good to me. So he's excited to come back. And I'm looking forward to that. That's to me must-see TV, even with the Mets playing so poorly.
Yeah, when the dust settles, we already discussed the Anthony Rizzo situation. I believe Jacob deGrom will have number 48 retired at Citi Field. It well deserved. The run that he had there was generational. And you mentioned before, the Mets have done one thing right, and they've done a lot of things right under Stevie Cohen, but they've done a lot of goodwill of appreciating their past. And I think they will do it in real time with deGrom returning. They appreciate what he's done for the franchise. Despite leaving, he was so important to what they did and what they continue to do. They built on the shoulders of what, really literally on his shoulder and his elbow. A lot of great runs there. You got to appreciate the greatness. And when time settles all, he'll be remembered as a Met despite it all. And it's going to be cool to see the Mets fans appreciate him. And hopefully the ones that are there understand his weight carries a large presence. But for what I'm looking forward to, and this is more of the deep dive nerdy side of baseball, we had the announcement of the Arizona Fall League kicking off October 6th. So
yeah,
it's running throughout November 15th. We got 6 teams loaded with top talent. And this year features 13 top 100 prospects, including Kevin McGonigal, the Tigers' number 2 overall, and Sebastian Walcott, which is the Rangers, who's number 4 overall. And it's the first time 2 of MLB's top 4 have played in the AFL since Bryce Harper and Mike Trout back in 2011. So pretty cool to see, something to watch. A lot of the highlights, go and look at the schedule and some of the players that are out there. I think some of the calendar highlights, we see a triple header in Tucson on October 11th. We have the Goodyear triple header on October 18th. They have a home run derby for the AFL, which will be must see November 8th. And the Fall Stars game will be on MLB Network November 9th. So if you have the MLB package on MLB TV, you'll be able to check these games out. It's well worth checking out these players. As we mentioned time and time again here on the show, the pipeline is shortening. You're going to see these players sooner than later. You're going to see players like Ethan Salas out here, Alfredo Duno and Aiden Miller and Braden Montgomery and other players down the line. So Kevin McGonigal, or also going to see Rockies Charlie Condon. A lot of exciting news over. He is someone you should be excited for to see coming up in Denver. But Sebastian Walcott, Kevin McGonigal going to highlight the class. But there's a deep, deep roster of players going to be highlighted here. And the AFL is a blast to watch. So dive deep. It's going to be some prospect season. And, it's going to keep baseball going well after the World Series.
Yeah, here's what I'll say. AFL is awesome. I feel like last year, to be completely honest, is the first year I really paid close attention to it. I will say, baseball, MLB, spend a little money and get some better camera work down there for us baseball fans. Like if you're gonna have like publicize that these bigger prospects are gonna be there, like come on now, like it shouldn't look like a D3 baseball game. Like you can do a little better to give us some more access there. If for those of you listening, if you've never kind of paid any attention to the Arizona Fall League, I suggest you do. It's kind of cool to follow. And some of these guys end up being big stars, even guys that maybe weren't huge prospects. I was perusing Geraldo Perdomo's baseball reference page today because that's the kind of thing I do as a baseball nerd, who's had an unbelievable season, a coming out party. He's been incredible. I noticed in 2019, he was Arizona Fall League, like rising star. He got named like the rising star. Now, 6 years later, I mean, he's been in the bigs for a few years now, but 6 years later, he is just turning into continued rising star at this level. So it's cool to follow and maybe end up seeing a guy that's not the Kevin McGonigal, someone else that, gets a little action there against these top prospects and turns out to be a big deal. Our boy Chase Selesky participated last year, had a lot of great things to say about it. He talked a lot about Caleb Durbin last year in the Arizona Fall League. He was Chase's pick to be like a big deal in Major League Baseball one day out of all the guys that were down there. And there's some big prospects down there last year. So definitely give the Arizona Fall League a look.
It would be interesting to see if Milwaukee makes a run, if Caleb Durbin has some big moments in October, coinciding at the same time where we have the AFL going on just a year removed. And it just shows you how quick that pipeline is, and seeing some players out there. It is something to check out. And just to kind of build on what you're talking about with the everything production wise that they do, they need their best hands on deck. Just get one of the TV broadcasts, or just like piece together an all-star team out there and figure out a way to make this meaningful to watch. Because we already talked about just really the elite prospects and some bounce back candidates and some breakout stars potentially. It's important for them to present it at the best way, because people are tuned out when it's just this overhead cam. It's the same thing when ESPN had the college baseball games. There's certain games that had the major league level flair for the bigger programs where they would have the dynamic of the different cameras, but some of them you're watching these games. And I got deep into college baseball last year. You're watching a game, which just feels like it's an overhead cam, like you're sitting in the stands. And that doesn't entice people to have a game day experience watching at home. And there needs to be investment at all levels. And it starts there, because if people tuned in and they see this is just poor production, they're immediately out. And baseball needs to embrace all the things. And I'm not saying that to put all the flair of Hollywood movie for these productions, but all it takes a few cameras, some HD lenses, some better production as far as scoreboard bugs, etc. Do your best of making this world worth watching, and the talent will speak for itself.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's not like a lack of money. Like, you don't have the resources to get a couple more cameras there, like that. You can do better. So I don't know. I feel like every year baseball's diving a little deeper into some of the, lesser publicized kind of things that are being a little more publicized now. Like, if you're going to do that, raise the production value. So we'll see. Maybe they will.
So that's it for this episode here. We appreciate you guys jumping in and listening. We love the baseball conversation. I know football has taken a stranglehold on America, but baseball is still happening here. The finale of the season is approaching, so don't tune out just yet. Even if your team's not out there, there's reasons to watch, and be like the Colorado Rockies fan base, showing up no matter what and checking things out, appreciating it all. And don't let baseball fall out of the spotlight. I understand the NFL is a monstrosity. They completely overshadow everything going on, but there's a lot of meaningful baseball going on. Tune in, continue to engage with our content, drive the conversation, root for your teams, get your popcorn ready for October. It's definitely going to be a blast as we approach the most meaningful part of the season.
Yeah, if you're a Colorado fan listening to this, DM me. I want to know the secret. I know there's something we don't know of why people are going to the ballpark still in droves.
Dude, it's good weed and craft breweries, man. That's what it is.
The secret sauce.
The secret sauce to it all. But we'll be back next week talking all things baseball. Remember to follow us on social media at Tablesetters Pod. If you can, be so kind, leave a 5-star review for us. Let people know what you like about the show. That's how we climb up the algorithms. I haven't seen any of the charts lately, but that's where we live sometimes. And it's because of you guys out there leaving reviews and sharing with your friends. Ask us some questions on social media. We're here. We're accessible. We look forward to having some guests on here very, very soon. But until that time, talking all things baseball, we will talk to you after a while.